This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with a Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Welcome to No One Told Us, the podcast that tells the truth about parenting and talks about all the stuff you wish you knew before having kids. I'm your host, Rachael, and today I'm so excited to welcome Betsy Kelly. Betsy began her career, actually this is how we know each other, as a speech pathologist. We used to work together in a public elementary school. And she worked with individuals who were nonverbal and required technology to communicate, which was so amazing to see. Now she has shifted gears, but she still has communication at the heart of everything she does. From Betsy's own experience, when she realized she was ready to get divorced, she felt very alone and she was desperate to hear the stories of other women and to tell hers in a safe space. She now hosts the podcast Divorce Stories and has created a community where she offers women information, empathy, and support as they leave their marriages that are no longer right for them. So this is such a sensitive and heavy topic, and I know that you do such an amazing job just, again, having that heart of communication at the center. So I'm really excited to have you on today for a really tricky topic.
Thanks so much, Rachael. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited too. And like I mentioned, you recently started your own podcast. So after today's episode, if anybody's feeling this or going through this or thinks they might be going through this soon, head over to Betsy's podcast to hear some real stories. And I think that is such an important, before we kind of dive into my questions, what kind of made you want to have that format for your podcast where you're kind of just talking through people's own stories?
Yeah. There's so many podcasts out there about divorce. And when I realized I would be going through divorce, I was scared. I felt lonely. I felt confused and I felt really overwhelmed. I felt that looking at this list of podcasts, I couldn't figure out where to start. It felt overwhelming. But what I knew I wanted was to know, what does it feel like to be other people in this situation? Do other people feel like me? And what I realized is that there wasn't something out there that met this need for me. And I started interviewing women, but I really felt that there was a need for this in the world. I felt that other people would benefit from hearing these stories as well. So here, 3 years later, Divorce Stories is finally a real thing.
Yeah, it's so exciting. And I know it's so much work. I mean, a podcast is such an incredible labor of love. So let's go back a little bit, though, to kind of your own personal experience with this. So what was it like when you first realized that your marriage was no longer right for you, or it wasn't the right fit for your family anymore for you to be married?
In the beginning, there was a lot of grief, of course. I spent a lot of time crying, trying to figure out how my kids were going to be okay. I think everyone that I talk to that has kids that decides to make this transition really worries. Are their kids going to be hurt? Are their kids going to be angry? What's it going to be like for their kids going to school and saying, my mom and dad are getting a divorce? And so like most people, this was the first concern that I had.
And how old were your kids at the time?
So my daughter was 7 and my son was 9. And they still seemed so little, it felt like I was really kind of ripping the rug out from under them.
How did you I actually hadn't really planned on asking this question, but since that's similar to my own kids' ages, I'm just curious, what words would I use? And so I'm curious, since you are a communication queen, how did you tell your kids? Or did you have a sit down with them? Was it a series of conversations? Did you use books? Was it all of the above?
I would say the one thing that I would recommend to everyone, if they have the resource to do it, is to talk with a professional about it. So we immediately found a therapist to have a couple of sessions, and the therapist was so kind and guided us to what would be some age-appropriate language. So with my kids, 7 and 9, we used the language that every relationship between mommies and daddies has two parts. It has the part where we love our kids and take care of them and give them food and cuddle them and love them together. And then it has a part where mommy and daddy go out on dates and sleep in the same bed and have romance. And we told them that in our marriage that the romantic part was going away, but the part where we loved them and took care of them and our family was going to stay, and it would always be the same, even though the romance was not going to be there anymore.
Right. I love that. And we are later going to talk more about the co-parenting piece too. So for anybody who's thinking about how to navigate that, just stick around. I would love to talk more about kind of your feelings, though. You talked about how you were crying a lot. There's a lot of grief when you first come to that decision, and it becomes very real. It must be also an incredible amount of fear. Like, what happens next? How am I going to do this? Can I do this? And I would imagine some guilt as well. Can you talk us through those feelings and how you kind of navigated those?
Yeah, I remember realizing that I had come to this decision that we were going to divorce and thinking that I was very alone all of a sudden, that when you're in a partnership, especially a partnership where raising kids is at the center, you're doing so many things in collaboration. Before you make any decision about your kids, you're talking to the other person. You're saying, what do you think about this? And there was this stark realization that I was making a decision that was going to tremendously impact my kids without collaboration, that I was doing this thing solely on my own, and it felt lonely. I was afraid. I was afraid that we understand, a lot of us understand that conflict is such a big problem for kids in watching their parents get divorced. And I was afraid I wouldn't be able to manage the conflict, that we would fight in front of our kids. And I mean, they're part of the reason people decide to get divorced in the first place. They don't want their kids to see them fighting. And so I was afraid about conflict and how that would impact my kids for sure.
And so how do you kind of hold space for your own? I mean, I'm just going back to remembering like the last major breakup I had, and with my husband, it would be that times 10, right? And I could barely get out of bed some days. I was so overcome with grief and sadness. How did you manage that while also showing up for your kids and being that emotional rock for them? That must have been so difficult.
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think all of us who are parents, right, have experience with compartmentalizing, right? Even in your marriage, right? I'm sure sometimes you and your husband have a disagreement and you are not done disagreeing when here comes your child wanting attention, wanting cuddles from both of you. And there was a lot of that in the beginning. There was a lot of, you're right, there were days that I couldn't get out of bed. I was crying in the grocery store. I was crying in the pickup line. And there was some amount of compartmentalizing, of saying, okay, right now I'm with my kids. Later, I will be grieving. Right now I'm with my kids. And truthfully, there were some times that I did kind of lose it in front of my kids. I think all of us are human. I can remember this one time I was listening to that Ed Sheeran song, Eyes Closed, and I was in the car with my daughter, and I just tears just running down my face. It's a song so much about grief, and I had so much grief. And my daughter said, Mama, why are you crying? And I just said, this is a sad song about losing someone you love, and I feel really sad right now. And she was so gracious. She hugged me. Both of my kids have really impressed me with their empathy through this process. So there was a balance. There was a balance of sort of holding it together for them and also being honest. I think they wanted to know that I hurt too. They were really devastated by this decision. And I think it would have been unnatural for them to not see me grieve.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think we're so often afraid for us to let our kids see our emotions. And, of course, there's an appropriate level and a level that goes too much. But I think you're right. It would have been weird to them if you just acted like everything was totally normal, but they're feeling so mixed up inside, right? It would have made them feel well, what's wrong with me? Why am I so sad? And mommy looks fine, right? I also wanted to ask, because you were just talking about arguing in front of the kids and things like that. And I think that's probably why so many people stay in marriages when they have little kids, is because they think that staying for the kids is better. They think that even if their kids are hearing fighting, that it's better than their kids being in two different homes or whatever it is. What do you think just from, and like, we're not therapists per se, but what are some things that you hear from people about that, about those staying for the kids type of misconceptions that people think about?
Yeah. Well, your parents' relationship is such a map for how you will experience love in the world, right? I mean, any therapist will tell you that the way that you are in your relationships is so connected to the way that your parents were with each other and with you. And I remember my own experiences that I looked at my marriage and I looked at the way we engaged with each other. I looked at the way that I had sort of become a smaller version of myself. And I thought, would I want this marriage for my daughter? No, I don't. I don't want my kids to think that this is the way to be happy in a marriage. It felt to me like I was sort of setting them up for a lifetime of not being fulfilled in their relationships. And I do believe that a lot of people, in deciding to stay, for their kids, they're modeling something that they would not want their kids to have. And I realized that I was going to be a way better mom after divorcing than I could possibly be in this partnership where I just felt like kind of a shell of myself.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I do want to hear more about what you say about communicating during the divorce process and after, particularly when it comes to co-parenting. We'll be right back. It is spring, and that means we want to be outside. We have kids' practices. We want to be on the go, going to the beach, taking walks after dinner. We don't have time to be in the kitchen cooking and prepping a million different meals every night. My husband keeps bugging me about when we're getting our next Factor box, and I don't blame him because they are so, so delicious. I honestly don't really know how they do it, but every single meal tastes like you're eating something from a restaurant. I have no idea how they do it, but it is so delicious and really filling and healthy too. You can also personalize your boxes so that you are meeting your nutrition goals and getting exactly what you want or need, like extra protein or fiber. A couple of our favorite meals recently have been the truffle mushroom macaroni and grilled filet mignon, which is so good. I also love the roasted garlic butter salmon. And I also really, really am into the loaded mashed potatoes and shredded chicken. It's just so delicious. And again, things that I would never think to make, never take the time to make, but are absolutely delish. So you can get started at factormeals.com/no-one-told-us-50-off and use code no-one-told-us-50-off to get 50% off your order plus free shipping for your first box. That's again, code no-one-told-us-50-off at factormeals.com/no-one-told-us-50-off for 50% off plus free shipping. Factor powers your day with satisfying breakfasts, on-the-go lunches, premium dinners, and guilt-free snacks and desserts. So it's much easier to savor more this spring. Factor meals pack in the flavor with none of the fuss. So get yours today. You know that feeling when it's Monday morning and you're out of literally everything and you have to pack the kids' lunches and give them breakfast and give them a million snacks and you have nothing to pull from in your fridge or pantry? Same. When we can't make it to the grocery store because we've had a really busy weekend, we are so happy that we have all of our Thrive staples in the pantry, from our snacks to our pantry items to things to make the kids for breakfast and sandwiches for school. They've got literally everything we could possibly need. And not only is it convenient because it's delivered, but we can also get our favorites on a subscription. So we don't even ever have to think about it. We can choose how often we want our favorite things delivered and when. So it just makes it ridiculously easy. And we never forget to have our favorite things for our kids on hand. I love Thrive's Healthy Swaps scanner. So you can actually scan a product and it instantly recommends healthier swaps. So I've swapped out some of our more sugary processed type snacks for more filling and high quality things, but are still at a great price on Thrive. So things like Chomps beef sticks, Simple Mills crackers, those are my kids' favorite things for their lunch boxes. And then I also really love the high protein things that they have and things for my pantry to make quick dinners, like the Primal Kitchen sauces. I absolutely love the teriyaki one for grilled chicken. It's so, so good with rice. If you're ready to make the switch too, go to thrivemarket.com/HeySleepyBaby for 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. Oh my gosh, $60. That's Thrive Market, THRIVE market.com/HeySleepyBaby. thrivemarket.com/HeySleepyBaby for 30% off your first order plus a free $60 gift. That's insane. Okay, so Betsy, this is probably the thing that most people are worried about if they haven't gone through this process yet, or that they are dealing with if they are in the midst of separating or divorce: communication and having difficult conversations. I mean, especially with me, I get this question actually a lot. You know, people will write in and say, oh, I'm divorcing, or I'm going through this custody thing, and my partner and I can't get on the same page about how we're going to handle sleep or feeding or parenting choices in general. So for those of us who are still in our marriages, that's hard, right? Like, it's hard to just be two different people with two different opinions on something important like parenting. And then when you add, like, you know, the grief and the resentment and the hurt of a separation, I think it adds fuel to the fire. So what would be, I guess, your top few pieces of advice for somebody going through this for the communication side of things when it comes to having those difficult conversations or coming to an agreement about a parenting choice?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge topic, and I have so much interest in it and so much to say about it, obviously. I think one piece of advice that I would give to people is that whatever you need to accomplish in your co-parenting relationship, one big piece, Kristen Little talks about this in her book, The Co-Parenting Handbook. She talks about separating being married from the business of co-parenting, right? So you were married to someone and you had all sorts of conflicts, you had all sorts of challenges, and then you decided to get divorced. And now each of you has your own feelings about this. But truthfully, raising your kids is kind of a project that you're doing together. And so if you can think of it like business, like, how do I communicate with coworkers? How do I communicate with people that I really need to get something done with? You can kind of shift away from how hurt am I by this person into what's really important for my kids. And even one of you having that shift can impact the whole dynamic. One of you deciding, I'm not going to fight today. I'm not going to have conflict about this today. I'm going to wait for another time. So that would be one piece of advice, is think about the business of co-parenting. Would you like another one?
Yes, please.
Okay. I think one of the things I thought when I came out of my marriage is there's like one way to co-parent, and it's very, like me, I thought that the right way to co-parent is have a lot of communication and a lot of sharing and a lot of collaboration and figure everything out together. And it turns out that my co-parent does not agree. That's actually the way to co-parent. And it actually, there is no right way to co-parent. There is the co-parenting that you and the other parent of your children can do with the least amount of conflict possible. And so then I started researching, there's close co-parenting. People have meetings all the time. They're always calling each other up and texting. And then, on the other end, they used to call it silo parenting, which basically means you've got one household over here and one household over here, and never the two shall meet. And no, I don't think any of us would argue that kind of intense separation for kids is ideal. But I do think there are some situations where it's what reduces conflict. And I think any co-parenting specialist will tell you, all of them have told me, the worst thing for your kids in divorce is for them to feel they need to choose between you. You guys can't get along. What did they do to deserve it? And so there's also parallel parenting, which, is some version of we communicate when it's necessary, but when it's not, we make decisions for ourselves, and the kids are fine. The kids are happy. So yeah, there is no one right way to do it. And the way that you think is right actually may not be the way your co-parent thinks it's right. And you have to work it out together.
Yeah, I actually saw this video this week. My phone must have been listening to me and knew that we were doing this interview. I got this just random video, not from somebody I follow, but it was, and I don't know that there's a term for it, but the parents actually switched houses. The kids were really little, and the kids stayed in the house, and the parents, I don't know if I don't know how they were paying for all this. Like, I don't know if they had the house and then the parents each had an apartment or something, but they would the parents would come and go and switch off basically. Have you run into people with that arrangement, or is that a little bit more out there?
Yeah, actually, this is much more common now than it used to be. For most of us, it's a temporary situation that we do in the time between realizing that we're going to get divorced and the complete separation of two houses. So these days, a lot of people do it for some temporary period of time. My co-parent and I did it for a year. And I actually think it was one of the things that really helped my kids to transition well before they needed to go to two houses. And then there are people who sort of aspire to do it permanently or semi-permanently. I think often it starts to be more challenging when we start to get partners and, think about what's ahead for me. Then the moving back and forth can be hard. But I wholeheartedly endorse it as a strategy in the beginning. And you're right, it can be expensive. Some things that people do, for instance, I had a friend who had a vacant studio that she rented me very cheap. My co-parent works part of the time in Sacramento, so his work put him up there for half the week. And some people, my now partner, he kind of couch surfed and he was very happy with that. His friends put him up when he wasn't with the kids, and it gave him company. It gave him community. And then there are people who actually rent one apartment, and so they take turns going to the apartment and going to the house. And for some people that works.
Wow. Yeah. And I think, what I'm hearing is that being open and being flexible is often best. And just knowing that not every situation has to be permanent, but keeping the kids and their stability at the forefront of your priority list is super, super important. I'm curious too, for those who are finding it really difficult to communicate or to come to an agreement, what would you suggest that they do? Is that where therapy comes in, or mediators and lawyers? What is the most effective way for people to kind of navigate those really, really tough situations where somebody is just stonewalling and not willing to communicate or budge at all?
This is hard because, right, the kids will continue to need things that you maybe won't agree upon. So some tools, I won't pretend to know all the answers, but some tools that people use are to read books. So there are some books out there that are, for instance, the co-parenting handbook is very helpful in sort of how have other people done this, right? What ways have people thought to come to agreement? Another thing that I really suggest is a co-parenting counselor, if it's something you have the resources to get. This doesn't have to be something you do even once a month, but a few sessions with a co-parenting counselor can really help you to see your co-parent with empathy as opposed to seeing them as the enemy, which I think, sometimes we come out of divorce with such hard feelings, but really your co-parent is still the person that you loved, is still the person that, thinks that your kids are the most important thing. And often a co-parent can help you to see each other with empathy again, to see each other as, a loving parent trying to do the best that they can. So I really felt co-parenting counseling was very helpful for us. And then the other thing is sometimes when we can't come to agreement, I try to remind myself that I'm not necessarily right. Just because I feel so strongly about something doesn't mean that the other person might not have a valid point. And that truthfully, if I give on this or compromise on this, it's all still probably gonna be fine. Very few things are life and death. What's really important is that your kids feel they have two parents who love and support them, and that your kids don't feel they're caught in the middle of these big issues that come up.
Yeah, that actually makes so much sense. You have to be really, I guess, humbled to come to that I might not be right. That is something that I have rarely ever thought, but I could see how it would be really, really helpful to take that perspective. We're going to take another quick break in a second, but I guess what are your top things for what you just said for helping your kids understand that they are still the priority and that they're not caught in the middle? What are maybe some things that you should not do, that people should just absolutely avoid if they can?
Yeah. So bad mouthing the other parent under any circumstance. It's always bad form. It always makes your kids feel terrible.
Yeah.
And bad mouthing isn't necessarily, oh, I hate your dad. Bad mouthing is like, cinch you in dirty clothes again, huh? So things
or even
that
just in front of them, like venting to your friend, but they're in earshot.
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely. Kids hear. Absolutely. Kids hear anything that you would not want them to hear. You want to make sure they are not in the house when you say it. And truthfully, I think being very careful what you say, even when the kids aren't going to hear you directly, because, your friend has children who will hear your friend tell it to her partner, and then will go to school and say, guess what I heard my mommy say about your mommy. So I think being of course, I feel it's so important to have support, but being very careful about where you get that support and who you're talking to when things get hard and you really need to say something not so nice about your co-parent.
Yeah, I could see how that game of telephone would just be so terrible. And I think that's probably the best piece of advice. I mean, my husband, his parents have been divorced since he was 4, and he still would get uncomfortable if they would ever say anything bad about each other, which they don't, luckily. But it just goes to show that even now we can all be together. We can invite all of the grandparents over for birthday parties. And it's this beautiful big family that my kids get to have because they've always been so intentional about really keeping it as civil as possible.
I had a podcast guest actually who was a child of divorce, and she said that still her favorite thing is that when it's her kid's first birthday and both of her parents can come, it really feels good to her.
Yeah. So, I guess next time you feel like bad mouthing your ex, just remember in, 20, 30 years, do you want to both be invited to your grandchild's birthday party, or is somebody going to be left out? Yeah. Okay. We're going to be right back. And I want to talk to you about building your new life and your new identity. We'll be right back.
Memorial Day doorbuster deals are here at Lowe's. Right now, Rewards members save $80 on the Master Forge 4-burner gas grill, now just $149. Plus, Rewards members save $900 on the Lowe's exclusive Hisense French door refrigerator, now only $999. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 5/26. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details. Program subject to terms and conditions. Details at Lowe's.com/terms. Subject to change.
Hey there, travelers. Kaylee Cuoco here. Sorry to interrupt your music, great artist BT Dubs, but wouldn't you rather be there to hear it live? With Priceline, you can get out of your dreams and into your dream concert. They've got millions of travel deals to get you to that festival, gig, rave, sound bath, or sonic experience you've been dreaming of. Download the Priceline app today, and you can save up to 60% off hotels and up to 50% off flights. So don't just dream about that trip. Book it with Priceline.
Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Okay, Betsy, so we've been talking a lot about the kids, but of course, we are important too. After divorce, what does life look like for you? What does it look like for the women that you speak with? How do we kind of rebuild and reclaim our identity, our sense of self after something like this?
I think one thing that's interesting and that your audience will probably be interested in is that in the beginning, most of us have big concerns about what it'll be like to be without our kids. Half the time here in California, unless there is a really good reason not to, probably both parents are going to end up with 50% custody. And so a lot of people think, what am I going to do half the time without my kids? And of course, at first you're sad. Of course, I cried the first few times I was up. Of course, when my daughter looked at me and said, please don't leave me. I can't do it without you. Oh, I wanted to die. It was horrific. Yeah. But then once the dust settled, I had half my time to do whatever I wanted to. And that was a big part of healing. Part of healing was knowing that when I'm with my kids, I give them 100%. I am attuned to them. I do activities they love. We find joy together. And then when I'm not with them, I really focus on myself. I don't spend that time doing their laundry or going to ball games or things that are parenting tasks. I do things for myself. I play guitar. I, go for a run, go out with my friends. And so that is definitely a point of joy that many people can't access when they realize they're getting divorced, is that there's joy without your kids. There's a lot of life out there.
Yeah, I love that reframe because it's both, right? It's you can miss your kids and be super sad about that. And there's this like silver lining where you get to kind of reclaim some of yourself. And like you said at the beginning, like you felt like your marriage had been making you so small for so long that it must have felt really great to kind of expand into yourself again.
Yeah. And it was lovely to think about what didn't work for me in this partnership. And looking ahead, for a long time, I was sure I would not have another partner. And I think a lot of people come out of marriage that way. Oh, I'm done. No more partners for me. Be single. I'm a great mom, be single and be a great mom. That's all I need. And then as time passed, I started to think, well, what would I do differently the next time? What does an ideal partnership look like for me? In my healing, in going to therapy, in couples therapy, in learning about myself, using the reflection that I got from my marriage, what did I learn that I can now use to really get the partnership that I want? It's been a real joy to look at life afresh with the knowledge that I learned from my marriage.
That was going to be something I asked you about next, was kind of like, how do you know when you're ready to get it back out there again? Like, I think probably a lot of people are really worried about it the second time around because they've been burned and now they have kids to think about. I don't want to just bring some random person home meeting my kids. Like, they have to be perfect. They have to be the one, all of that kind of stuff. So like, how do you know when it's time? How do you know when you're ready? I'm sure that there's a big range and it really depends on the person, right?
Yeah, you will know this inside yourself. One of the things that helped me to know was, you can tell I'm a big fan of therapy. I went to therapy. Mm-hmm. But an equivalent to therapy is talking openly with people and vulnerably about your feelings and how things are going for you. I remember in the very beginning, someone said to me, oh, are you going to start dating? And I felt terrified. Like, oh no, what if I was on a date and I ran into my ex and my kids? What if I was on a date and someone saw me and told them? So it was clear, not ready yet. And then 6 months passed and I was used to sleeping alone, and 7 months passed. We actually agreed when we split that we would wait at least 6 months before dating. We live in a small town. We wanted the kids to have time before anyone said, oh, I saw your mom on a date. Yep. Yeah. And what that did is it sort of freed me from thinking about it. I said 6 months, I don't need to worry. Is it time to date? No, definitely not. And then 7 or 8 months, I started to think it might be fun to put on some clothes and go out, with a person who's a romantic possibility. It might be fun to flirt, might be fun. So, and I did approach it pretty lightly. I held it with a light hand. I was not looking for a partner right away. I think a lot of us had kind of icky step family experiences as children, or parents who dated a lot without a lot of concern for how that impacted us. And I really wanted to do right by my kids. I didn't want to introduce anyone to them until that was someone who was going to stay in their lives for a long time. So it took another 6 or 7 months before I was really ready to seriously consider even dating someone more long term. Mm-hmm. I do have a resource to recommend. There's a book called The Step Family Handbook, and it starts at kind of dating casually all the way through blending families. And I learned so much from it. And when my current partner and I started thinking about introducing each other to our kids, we read it, and it kept us from making some pretty big mistakes. Oh, so wow. I highly recommend it.
Do you have any other resources or things that have just been especially helpful to you as you've navigated all of these different parts of divorce?
Yeah. In the beginning, it was very hard for me to access resources. I felt it was just really overwhelming. But as my divorce went on and I started to need to know very specific things like, okay, what's the best way to find a co-parenting counselor? Or, what do I need the divorce lawyer to do versus what should I get a financial specialist to do? There's a podcast called Divorce and Beyond by Susan Guthrie, and she has many, many episodes. And usually if there's a topic you want, you can Google you can search Divorce and Beyond and the topic you want, and you'll find something relevant. I really trust her content.
Okay, perfect. That's super helpful. And then you also, as we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, have a new podcast called Divorce Stories. So how do you feel like storytelling and community can help other women going through this and help them get started on that healing process?
We like to laugh about that. My partner will say, I never thought about divorce until one day I did. And then I was like, divorce, I could do that. And I think that is true for a lot of us. We're like, stay married, whatever it takes. And then a light comes on in our brain that goes, I don't have to be miserable anymore. I can be happy. And what storytelling does for me is that it allows me to see a reality in which things could be different from the way that they are. I think a lot of us, particularly in those early years with kids when it's really, really hard, we kind of yearn to see examples of people surviving it, whether they got divorced, whether they stayed married and went to see a couples counselor, whether they just got through the hard part and things got better. You want to be able to see that there's hope on the other side. And that's really what Divorce Stories is about for me. It's about someone who maybe doesn't know how they're going to get out financially, sees someone who struggled with finances and got out. Someone maybe who's from a religious background sees a story of someone who was able to get out of their marriage, even though it went against their faith. So showing people examples of a better way to be is really my goal.
That's so amazing. I love that. My last question is, what would you tell someone who is listening to this episode and maybe quietly wondering if she's ready to leave her marriage? Maybe this is something that she just popped on because she was really curious about. It's like maybe a little thought in the back of her mind. What would you say?
That's a really hard time in this process because you feel as if even uttering the word that you might want a divorce is a betrayal of your partner. I remember even thinking divorce was a betrayal. And I think my advice would be to find someone that you really trust, someone like a therapist, like a best friend, that will let you say the absolute worst, I think I might want a divorce, and not judge, not give advice, really just hold space for you so that you can start to explore, is this really what I want? Is this a possibility for me? Just talking to someone who lets you say the truth like it is will help you figure out if you're ready or not.
Yeah, that's such good advice. And I think so many people, like you said, are scared to even say it out loud, and even to a friend. Like, that's why I love a therapist. I think so many people don't even want to admit it to their friends because they're like embarrassed, or they're like, oh, but what if I stay? I don't want my friend to think all this bad stuff about my partner if I decide to stay. I remember that was how I felt when I went through a really big breakup, and I read this book. I don't know if it holds up now, so I don't know if I want to even recommend it, but I read this book. It was called Too Bad to Stay, Too Good to Leave, or something like that. After reading that, I finally was like, okay, I'm going to start talking to my friends about like what's going on. And sure enough, they were all like, Rachel, like you need to go. And that kind of gave me that little push or that validation. But it was a shock to a lot of people because I had never let on that there was anything wrong, that there was anything going on. Like everything was just perfect, because it's hard to admit that to not just yourself, but to other people.
We want to be loyal to our partners. We want to feel like we're good partners, and we definitely feel guilt that maybe this isn't working out for us. So yeah. And I do think one thing that happens when we tell people we're considering divorce and then we don't leave is it sometimes then that friend has a lot of strong feelings about us not leaving. So it's definitely a real problem. If you're that friend, reserve judgment, man.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a lot harder than it looks.
Yes, just listen with an open heart and an open mind, please. All right. Well, this has all been so helpful. Thank you so much for joining us today. Where can people find you? I know you are on TikTok as well. So can you just let people know where they can connect with you?
Absolutely. You can find me on TikTok. My handle is at Divorce Doula Betsy, and I have a website, www.betsykellycoaching.com. Everything I do is there.
Perfect. And the podcast is such an incredible resource as well. I'm so glad you started it. We'll put all of that in the show notes for people to find. Thank you again so much for joining. I know that this is going to help so many women, so I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rachel. Such a pleasure.
Luxury living awaits at Fairmont, Preferred Living's newest community in the Westerville, New Albany area. Start the day in your stylish suite with soaring ceilings, spa-inspired bathrooms, and smart home features. Get moving in the Fitness and Wellness Center before grabbing a Starbucks coffee at the clubhouse. Then spend the afternoon by the pool, perfecting your swing on the golf simulator or grilling with friends. Schedule your tour of Fairmont at livepreferred.com. That's livepreferred.com.